Welcome to The Explainer. We've always been told that a growing economy means a happier country. But what if that's not the whole story? Today, we're going to tackle this massive puzzle about money and national well-being. Let's dive right in.
So we're kicking things off with what's called the money-happiness puzzle. And trust me, it's a real paradox that pretty much challenges everything we've been taught to think about national progress and success.
I mean, this is the big question, isn't it? It just feels like it should be simple. More wealth equals more well-being. But when you actually look at the data for rich countries, the picture gets, well, really fuzzy.
Okay, so get this. The source material points out something pretty wild. Since 1970, global GDP has tripled. Yeah, our economies are 3 times bigger. And yet, life satisfaction in the wealthiest nations has barely even budged. It's pretty much just flatlined. So you gotta wonder, where did all that potential happiness go?
Well, this whole thing actually has a name, the Easterlin paradox. The idea is that once a country has enough money to cover all the basics, just throwing more cash at the economy doesn't seem to move the happiness needle. And that's the exact mystery we're unpacking today.
So if the sheer amount of money isn't the answer, then what is? Well, the research we're looking at today proposes this brilliant shift in perspective. It's not about how much you have, it's all about how you use it.
And this slide really lays out the core idea perfectly. The research argues that for way too long, we've been obsessed with the volume of our economic activity, just growing GDP for the sake of it. But the real key, they say, is in the composition. It's about what we're actually spending all that money on.
To really get this idea of composition, the researchers came up with a simple but super powerful framework. They break down a country's big picture spending into 3 categories, which they call teach, heal, or steal. All right, let's break this down. First up is teach, or what they call institutional infrastructure. This is all the good stuff, the proactive spending that builds a stronger society for the future. We're talking education, good public health systems, that kind of thing. Then you've got heal, the remediation load. This is all the reactive spending, fixing problems that probably could have been prevented. It's necessary for sure, but it's not really moving you forward. And finally, there's steal, or extractive dissipation. This is basically spending that just moves money around without creating any real value, often making a few people rich at everyone else's expense.
Okay, so the crucial thing here is the balance between these 3. The researchers created a metric for it called the institutional ratio, or IR. You can almost think of it like a health score for a country's spending. A high IR is simple. It just means a country invests way more in that proactive teach stuff than it spends on the reactive heal and wasteful steal.
Okay, so that's the theory. Sounds pretty good, right? But does it actually hold up? Let's get to the data, because this is where things get really, really compelling.
And here it is, the single biggest finding from the paper. It's not about GDP, it's not about total spending. The one factor that is most strongly and consistently linked to higher national happiness is this, institutional ratio.
And wow, just look at these numbers. This is where it all kind of clicks into place. The data is just so clear. See that correlation for the institutional ratio? It's a positive 0.80. Now, if you're not a stats wizard, let me just tell you, that is a huge deal. That's an incredibly strong link. And then you look at just the total amount of money being spent. Negative 0.18, which basically means there's no real connection to happiness at all. So composition is absolutely king here.
Let's make this a bit more real with an example. Okay, on one side you have the USA. Its institutional ratio is 25%. So only a quarter of its overhead goes to those proactive teach activities. Then, on the other side, you've got Denmark, with a ratio of 63%. And just look at how that lines up with happiness and social trust. The difference is absolutely stark, and it perfectly illustrates the paper's whole point.
This all leads to a really fascinating new concept, well-being efficiency. It's basically a way of asking, are we getting the most happiness bang for our economic buck? It's not just about having a big economy, it's about having a smart one.
And this chart shows it beautifully. You see, Finland has a lower GDP per person than the United States, yet it manages to achieve 19% higher well-being efficiency. It's just better at turning its economic output into actual flourishing for its citizens. And according to the researchers, that gap is driven by its healthier economic composition.
So what does this all mean for us? Well, it suggests there's a completely different way forward, a new path to well-being that doesn't just rely on endless, mindless growth.
I absolutely love this quote from the paper because it perfectly reframes the entire problem.
The Easterlin paradox isn't some deep mystery about growth itself. It's really a lesson that when our growth is channeled into those heal and steal buckets, it's just not going to make us any better off.
So what are the big takeaways here? First, the path to a happier society isn't just about more growth. It's about better growth. And that means we need to rebalance our economies, shift spending away from heal and steal, and pour it into those proactive teach investments. The bottom line is, we can actually redesign our economies to directly aim for human well-being. And that leaves us with a final, massive question to chew on. For so long, we've used GDP as the ultimate report card for a country, but if we know it's missing this huge piece of the puzzle, what should we be using instead? What does a truly successful nation even look like in the 21st century? Thanks for joining me.